Beside this busy road in Tottenham stand the Seven Sisters, 7 trees that form a ring. These trees are not yet 20 years old, but there has been an unbroken tradition here for 2,000 years, since Roman times, of a grove of 7 sacred trees. The trees mark the beginning of the story. I am going on a tour of Tottenham and the surrounding area, looking at our sacred heritage, opening sacred doors to see inside, discovering art treasures spanning 1,000 years. I'm standing beneath another tree. This yew dates back over 1,000 years, a living reminder that All Hallows Tottenham has been a place of worship since the Saxon times. The present church dates back to the 14th century, and every century since has added to this architectural treasure house. The tower's staircase has not changed in 700 years. In the corner of the bell chamber is a bell taken as a war trophy by the British when they captured Quebec from the French in 1759. Another French addition is this Renaissance window. It depicts the prophets and the evangelists. The church has many fine monuments. Perhaps the most significant is this one, to the royalist Sir Robert Barkham of 1644. It's a work by the first great English sculptor, Edward Marshall. In marble, Marshall created true likenesses. Timid Sir Robert and his redoubtable wife. Here are their 12 children, which appropriately for Tottenham included 7 sisters. The acclaimed Victorian architect William Butterfield worshipped here, and during the 1870s restored and extended the church, adding another remarkable chapter to the history of All Hallows. Up these stairs, tucked away above the porch, is the parish schoolroom, dating from 1500. Through this squint hole, the boys could watch the mass in the church below. Our next church will be Haringey's other medieval building.
This tower is the remaining part of St Mary's Church in Hornsey, a parish dating back to 1291. The tower itself was completed around 1500, and the top section added in 1831. Through this door we enter into a Tudor room. With a softly arched Tudor fireplace and a second doorway leading up to the tower. In these bricks we can see the change from small early Tudor bricks to the yellow stock bricks of the late Georgian period when the tower was heightened.
The tower resides in the centre of Hornsey village, and from here we can see most of the cityscape and our churches.
The graveyard of the old church remains. This is the tomb of Samuel Rogers, a poet of the Romantics, and in his lifetime is celebrated as Wordsworth and Byron. Mine be a cot beside the hill, a beehive's hum shall soothe my ear, a willowy brook that turns a mill with many a fall shall linger near. A swallow oft beneath my thatch shall twitter from her clay-built nest. Oft shall the pilgrim lift the latch and share my meal, a welcome guest. Around my ivied porch shall spring each fragrant flower that drinks the dew, and Lucy at her wheel shall sing in russet gown and apron blue. the village church among the trees, where first our marriage vows were given, with merry peals shall swell the breeze, and point with taper spire to heaven.
Surrounded now by traffic, the middle of old village of Tottenham has been marked by a wayside cross, locally known as the High Cross.
The monument we see today dates from around 1600, with the decoration added in 1809. The style is an early experiment in Gothic revival, as is the nearby Holy Trinity Church in Tottenham Green. Built in 1828, the architect James Savage gave Tottenham a mini version of King's College, Cambridge. Inside the church, we can see how design was moving from classical to rediscovering the Gothic.
In our next church, built 30 years later, we'll see how designers fully immerse themselves in the Gothic.
I'm in St Anne's Church in South Tottenham, what is now called St Anne's Road. But when the church was built, it used to be called Hanger Lane, named after the public gallows and the gibbet located nearby.
The church was built in 1860 at the considerable price of £11,000 and paid for by the city merchant Fowler Newsom. He also built a school and model cottages, a form of decent housing, which are just across the road. The architect was Thomas Talbot Berry. He'd been a pupil of the famous Augustus Pugin. Pugin was a great pioneer of the revival of Gothic architecture, and it's easy to see his influences on Berry. The two worked together on designing many details in the interior for the rebuilding of the Houses of Parliament. Talbot was also an artist and a scholar of the medieval architecture. The church was built in a time when there were many fields in this area, just before it filled up with housing. The stone carvers went out into the fields of Tottenham and found leaves and flowers to recreate in stone.
Like many churches in Tottenham, St Mary's the Virgin was set up for the rapidly increasing population of the late Victorian times. In 1884, Marlborough College, a public school in Wiltshire, financed a mission to the area and with the local people, raised this magnificent church.
The mission included those who worked such long hours during the day that they could only come to church at night. As stained glass couldn't be seen at night,
the solution was found by adding wall and ceiling paintings. The reredos, the screen behind the altar, is the work of the sculptor Harry Hems, made of alabaster. Hems' most famous commission is the reredos of St. Albans Cathedral, but here, the execution is just as exquisite. Hems also sculpted the monumental tomb of St. Mary's first vicar, Father Noel Smith, who died in 1908. The organ dates from 1889 and remains in exceptional working order to its original building by William Hill. The decorated case is by the William Morris School.
This is Knowle Park Estate, one of the earliest garden suburbs in Britain.
It was designed in 1880 by Roland Plum and provided well-built and pleasant housing for the artisan classes. It was part of the Victorian values of work ethic and self-improvement. A piece of land was set aside for a church and the local people raised the funds to build this giant of a church in 1889. The inside of the church was adorned with stained glass windows, mosaics, and a dramatic set of the Stations of the Cross by Martin Travis.
Here we are in St. Bartholomew's Church in Stamford Hill. The church was built in the arts and crafts style of 1903. The architect was William Carrow, and like other arts and crafts designers in the time, his take on the Gothic was open to reinterpretation and was rather inventive, and was always done with careful craftsmanship.
The foundation stone was beautifully lettered by Eric Gill. Inside the church, we find a space that is large but feels intimate. Everything is almost at a childlike scale. There's a mixture of Gothic and Art Nouveau, and when you look closely, you notice the architect, Carrow, has jumbled up symmetry and asymmetry. There are interior windows that invite us to explore the building on different levels. The present building is the fourth rebuilding of the church, the original being medieval. After the Great Fire of London in 1666, Sir Christopher Wren rebuilt the church, not in the Gothic style, but the Baroque. The font and the pulpit date from 1680. When the Bishop of London consecrated the church in 1912, he called it the Little Cathedral. Though as we'll see, it's not so little. It was built to seat over 750 people, a huge, light church with a perfect acoustic. It was designed by the noted church architect John Alder. Alder travelled extensively in Britain, France and Italy, studying medieval buildings and finding details to inspire him. St. Benet's is one of Alder's last commissions, and being built only a couple of years before the outbreak of the First World War, it's from the last great church building era. Clear windows add to the feeling of vast space, and the designs in the windows are symbols for the saints. One of the glories of St. Benet's is its organ. It contains pipework from the 18th century by Samuel Green, and then was later incorporated into the handsome rosewood case and instrument by Willis. We now leave the Gothic era of architecture. Let's see where the 20th century design takes us. St. Mary's and St. George's, Hornsey, was rebuilt after the previous church was damaged due to wartime bombings. The style is the new look of the 1950s. Inside the church of 1959, we find medieval and Tudor monuments and artifacts from the older St. Mary's, the tower of which we saw earlier. Like the tower, the font dates from around 1500. This is John Skennington in his shroud. This is a hanging pyx in beautiful modern silversmithing. and hidden away under these carpet towels, a glimpse of Elizabethan London.
Okay, so the inscription says, "Here lieth buried George Ray of Highgate, gent, who departed this life." There's another bit. "Who married 2 wives, and by the first had George Ray, his now son." Yes, and this is little George over here. We have these 2 wives over here, and George over here, George Senior.
Again from the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, and reputedly saved from a ship of the Spanish Armada, is the parish chest. We've one more church to see that moves modern design on further into the 1990s and post-modernity.
St. Paul's Haringey is our last church, and it brings our look behind sacred doors to the present. The church was completed in 1993.
The style is a mix of ancient geometric forms meeting post-modernity. Inside the church, we find a space flooded with natural light and containing many fine works of modern sculpture and craftsmanship.
And our last sacred door opens to the tabernacle, lined with Egyptian porphyry, gold leaf, and containing the Blessed Sacrament.
We hope you enjoyed this glimpse behind sacred doors. This film accompanies an exhibition at Bruce Castle Museum in Tottenham, running from July to October 2015.
Stirb